Well, good morning, coasters. And today I've got the pleasure of having a chat with Michael O'Brien. And Michael's a resident in Hokitika, has been for many years. He's a coaster, as far as we're concerned. And he was at the top level of lands and surveys, or lands and deeds, in the day when when a lot of it was located here in Hokitika. So um, Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. And coasters, you can find a full copy of this interview on the Coasters Club YouTube channel, and just type in Michael O'Brien, a coaster, or you can go to the Hokitika Museum where a copy will be sitting there on a memory stick. Well, Michael, what's your full name?
Michael Joseph O'Brien.
Michael Joseph O'Brien. What's the background to the O'Brien? Is the O'Brien
The O'Brien was my grandmother, who never married,
yeah?
and had a son, Daniel, who was my father.
And in New Zealand?
She came out from Ireland and got pregnant and
Yep.
had her son.
Well, I'd worked out the Irish connection,
Yeah,
and so whereabouts were you born?
in Matara.
Right.
I was the first baby born in the Matara maternity home under Social Security. It's the 10th child of my parents, and as far as I know, I wasn't expected to live, so the matron at the hospital baptised me and gave me my name, Michael Joseph, after Michael Joseph Savage, the Prime Minister who brought in Social Security.
And Michael, what year was that?
1939.
Wow. So what does that make you now?
It's 80.
You're in good nick.
Yeah.
You're doing all right, aren't you? So who were your mum and dad? What did your dad do?
Dad was, well, he was in the old days, he was a freezing worker. He was a rabbiter. Started off as a rabbiter in Mandeville area, Edendale. Then he went into the freezing works at Matara. He joined the union, and when the depression was about to break, he was leading the union, and they started a nationwide strike where they thought that they could. What had happened was the freezing works owners were making more money, and they decided to cut the wages of the workers.
Oh dear.
So they went on strike, and unfortunately for my father, they broke under the pressure of the owners, and he lost his job. So he was unemployed in the latter part.
With 10 children?
Yeah, about 8 at that stage, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, in Matara, in a 2-bedroom semi-detached home.
And he was obviously an outdoor man, because if he's into rabbits and
Yep, yeah, he was a bit of an outdoors man. His boast was that we shifted to Gore in late '39 after I was born, and his boast was that he became the biggest bludger in Gore.
oh goodness
So
me.
he worked as the Minister of what do you call it? Industry, factories and industry,
Right.
for a number of years, and then in 1949 he became a wine reseller, and did most of his life doing wine reselling and soil testing for Vitex of Temuka.
And did your mum? Was she well? With 10 kids, I can already feel what the answer is.
She actually had 16 kids.
Altogether.
Yeah.
That's unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
16.
16.
How many?
14 lived,
Right.
and there was 8 boys and 8 girls, and 1 boy and 1 girl was disposed of, so we had 7 of each.
Wow. And how many of your brothers and sisters have you outlived?
Or most of them. There's only 6 of us left.
Mind you, the youngest one of course, you being youngest and
No.
now 80. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Not the youngest.
Oh, you're not the youngest.
No. There's 3 or 4 more after me.
Dear. So when you were born, do you remember? You won't remember Mum bringing you home, but do you remember your first home?
Yep. It was in Stratford Street in Gore.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was it like?
It was a big brick home, 4-bedroom. What I remember most about it was the back lawn. The kids used to play football on it. But all sorts of things happened there. With a big family, they had different ones. Bill had his greyhounds, and Lewis had his underground huts, and all sorts of things went on. Yeah.
And Gore's a good place to live.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You're the
I look on it as a very cold old hole now, but at that time, my father used to say it's the best climate in New Zealand. He swore to that.
good on him. Good on him.
He was loyal.
Now, when you were being brought up, what did a family of 8 or 10 or whatever? What did you do for fun as a kid?
Oh, we played with each other. Basically, the river was just across the road. We did a lot of swimming in the summertime in there, and the Willows had us playing cowboys and Indians and whatever else. We just had lots of fun. We grew up, the sisters. It was a good mix, and we just had played with each other.
And I guess you come from the day where Mum would say, "Make sure you're home by dark."
Pretty well, yeah.
Amazing times.
Yeah. We didn't go very far because we had all we needed at home. We weren't roamers, and it was one of the things about life is that we kept our friendships in house, as it were.
And when you went down the river, was that the Matara River?
Yeah.
That's a good sized river.
Yeah.
Did were any fish there?
Oh yes. Oh, millions of them. Yeah, we used to go in the evening. If you walked along the banks of the river, certain time of the year, I can't remember if it was the springtime or the autumn, I'm not sure. But in the evening, you'd see them leaping, just hundreds of them.
Michael, would they be trout or would they?
Brown trout, basically.
Wow. Yeah. And I guess the freezing works would have been feeding a bit of tucker in there as well.
No, the freezing works was downstream.
Oh, further down.
About 8 miles downstream.
Okay. Did you, Michael? Did you have a nickname when you were growing up?
Brick.
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 How did you get that?
Every one of us was a Brick. Brick O'Brien. All the girls too. Because our eldest sister had very red hair. And when she went to school, she was called Brick O'Brien, and we all got it.
So the whole lot of you.
Yeah.
Whereabouts did you attend primary school?
At St Mary's School in Gore. And I did pretty well there. Had a good memory.
Well, being good Catholic boy, and at St Mary's, the nuns would they have been nuns teaching you?
There were nuns teaching us then. Yeah.
The Catholic schools have produced some amazing people throughout New Zealand and overseas, and they're pretty amazing. What kind of books did you read when you were at school? When you first started?
Well, when I first started reading, I was just telling somebody the other day, I had a horrible habit. In the back of the church, there used to be little pamphlets and things about religious things and lives of saints and holy people and that sort of thing. And they were 4pence or 6pence, but I couldn't afford them. So I used to take them home, read them, and bring them back the next day.
Did Father ever catch up on you?
No, nobody caught on. But sort of when leaving school, it was mostly westerns and detective stories that I read. Yeah.
So you're a keen reader?
Oh yeah, I was a very avid reader. Yeah, I would disappear into a book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen so much these days.
It does when I get into the right chapters here.
Right. Right. Where did you attend high school?
Good question. I went to Marison in Invercargill for Form 3. It was not a very successful year, but towards the end of it, I got a job I was 14, and I got a job in Glenary Sheep Station as a shed hand.
Right.
Wool shed.
Where's Glenary?
At Waikaia.
Oh wow! So you're
Waikaia.
away from home.
Just a weird thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, did you have a favourite subject at school in high school? Do you have one that you like? I've got some people I've interviewed have said best part of school was the day I left.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, it used to be lunchtime, but if you've got to have a subject, I was fairly good at history because I had a good memory.
Okay.
And I stuck at that. So, for instance, when I went back to school a couple of years later, and went on school certificate here. I missed out on school certificate, but I got 78 or something for history, and 23 for Latin, and 29 for English or something like that. And it was just a
That's just something you had.
subject. Yeah.
When you're at school, was there ever a teacher that you recall that was important to you? One that was basically a favourite teacher?
There's a couple of the nuns have stuck in my mind for things that they taught or the way they taught. Sister Mary Pascal in Standard 6. She was just a little lady, and she used to have to stand on the chair to give me the strap.
Are you joking?
I'm not joking.
She was little.
She was little. Or if she didn't stand on the chair, we had to kneel on the floor. But yeah, she was a little lady. But she was, I always remember her for being a kindly person, even though she strapped me quite regularly.
Well, you may have needed it.
I needed it, yes, I did.
So that was Sister Mary Pascal, and who else?
Well, the year before that was Sister Mary Aloysius, and I can still remember some of the catechism as she taught it. I can remember a chapter that I practically off by heart because she drummed it into us.
Or encouraged you to learn it.
Yeah.
Now, when you're a young man, and by young I mean sort of 13 or 14, if you had a mate back then, how would he have described you?
Well, I had several little mates back then because one of the odd things about my life is that I don't have many friends because of what happened with going to. I had these mates, Brian Wallace and John Easton and various ones in Gore in primary school, but then I would go on the bus at 8 o'clock in the morning to get to Marison Invercargill at 9:30.
Right.
And of course they were all in school by then, and then I had to leave immediately at 3:30. So I never got to make any friends down there, and I lost the friends I had in Gore. But they were good friends, David Henderson and John and Brian.
So how would they have described you? Were you a cheeky fella? Were you quiet? Were you out there? How do you think they'd have what would they have said?
I used to have to fight the fights.
The Irish.
Well, the bigger kids in the classes ahead would pick on us sometimes.
Yeah.
And I get back from lunch at school, and Dennis Holland had picked on John Easton, and I had to go and front up to Dennis Holland and get beaten up. Things like that. That was my role.
As a child, did you have anything in your mind that you wanted to do when you grew up?
Yeah. I wanted to be a priest, Catholic priest.
Right.
Yeah.
And did you ever get to? Did you have to train?
Yes.
And did you go through and become a priest?
Yes.
And how many years ago was that?
50 years ago now.
Goodness me.
50 years ago. Yeah.
Goodness me. And whereabouts did you train?
In Ballarat in Australia.
Wow. Well, and so
7 years hard.
7 years hard labour.
Yeah.
And so after what made you decide to come out of the priesthood and basically shift back to New Zealand?
Well, I was in New Zealand. I became a Redemptorist priest, which is a sort of a mission priest, do home missions, go around parishes and do a bit of a stir up and encourage people to
Come along.
At that time, I was having difficulties believing some of the things that the church was teaching.
Yep.
It was just about the time of the Second Vatican Council, and there was a lot of what's the word? I can't think of the right word. Dissatisfaction, perhaps, or a lot of questions being asked, because Pope John had opened the door to questions which had been closed for so many centuries.
Yep.
And questions were being asked, so I started asking a few, and I discovered that I was a round peg in a square hole, and
Yep.
it just didn't fit. So I left after about 4 or 5 years. 5 years.
And then you headed at that point back to New Zealand?
I was in New Zealand.
Oh, you did New Zealand at that
in
stage.
Closed church at the time.
So after high school, you've clearly gone and you've become a priest. What about when you entered the workforce as to earn a wage rather than for spiritual direction?
Right. Well, when I was 14, I got a job at Tractors and Implements in Gore as a spare part in the spare parts department.
Right.
But when, after I left the priesthood, I had nothing, so I started off as a apple pruner in Tasman. Lived in a wee quarry by myself.
So up in Motueka or somewhere like that?
Tasman.
In Tasman?
Tasman itself, little village Tasman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And beautiful place too.
Yeah, yeah. Robin Deck was the, and his dad owned the orchard.
Yeah.
And the Deck Senior, his father was the first doctor in Motueka. In those days they didn't have roads. He said they used to travel by boat a lot and by horse.
So you were picking apples. What happened next? Pruning apple trees.
Then I went into Nelson and got a job. I got a raft of jobs for a while. I was in a foundry at Anchor Dormans.
Well, that was a major company in its day too, just quietly.
Yeah, it was. With the car factory, I was carrying parts for Rovers. Then they made Triumphs and Rovers up there.
Yeah.
I was in the bush for a few weeks until my wife insisted I get a tetanus course of tetanus injections.
Ooh.
I turned out to be allergic to them.
Oh, to tetanus?
Yeah, to the injection anyway. And I came home from work one day and collapsed on the floor, and I was in bed for a few days. They had me in a cold bath and unconscious for quite some time.
Oh, goodness me. I was allergic to the needles.
Oh yeah.
And so where did you go from there?
From there I went to Russell's Manufacturing, a furniture factory.
Right.
I spent a couple of years there in work, but my father-in-law used to play bowls with a fellow up there that was worked for the State Services Commission, and he put my name down for a job. I was offered two. One was at Salisbury Girls' School, which I didn't feel I was fit for, and
Yep.
then the other one was at a lady rang me from Land in Debt, I thought she said, and I thought, oh well, that's to do with people that can't pay their mortgages. I might be able to help out there. So I went and got interviewed at Land and Deeds office. Yeah.
And got the job?
And got the job, yeah.
And roughly what year was that?
1970. Hang on. 74.
I was going to say it must be early 70s.
74.
And tell us about how Lands and Deeds worked. I mean, I try to tell people, often the young ones here, that all of our records for Westport were held in Nelson, and all of our records in Hoki were held in Christchurch and here. Is that roughly right? What was the spread?
Well, the spread was at the beginning of the settlement of New Zealand. It was divided into 12 provinces, and each province had its own deeds record.
Right.
So there was Hokitika, Blenheim or Marlborough, Nelson, Christchurch, Dunedin, and Invercargill in the South Island. And all the land records for Hokitika were held here, as well as records for the company's offices.
Of course.
Yeah. And so they were all held at the old government building.
Yes.
For a start, and then round at Como House.
Yep. Yeah, no.
And that was built. And I came the year after they shifted into Como House. Yeah, we had a bit of a hiatus of people relieving because the registrar left and for health reasons, and they couldn't find a replacement for some time.
And so when so all the company's office records were there, all of the land registration records were there. Was it a big operation at the time? Was it one person or two? Or?
Oh no, it was 3 or 4 at the most. Yeah.
And then it all got amalgamated to somewhere, didn't it? Was it Canterbury?
No, it's all amalgamated into the computer.
Oh, she's in the cloud.
It's in the cloud, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you can go to anywhere and get records from anywhere else.
So did you retire after that? After it?
I was made redundant,
Yeah.
and then a friend of mine, John Arthur, convinced one of his bosses, Kent Martin, that I might have some useful information because the electricity, he worked for Westpower,
Yes.
and the Electricity Act had come into being, and it had started having an effect where the companies had to have easements over land before they could drive on and put their poles in and stuff like that. So they hired me to go through what easements they had and to see what they didn't have and what they needed, and
Actually, that would have been a huge undertaking.
it was lovely. It was good. Yeah.
And so that was Westpower.
Yeah.
They're a good company, very good company.
A very good company to work with.
So did you retire from there?
I retired from there gradually.
And yeah. How old were you when you retired?
That's 67,
67. That's a good age too.
68 or something. Yeah.
Nice, easy one. This one, Michael. How old were you when you started dating?
32.
Do you remember your first date with Carol?
My first date wasn't with Carol.
Stop it.
I do remember my first date with Carol.
Okay. So let me rephrase that, Costas. Do you remember your first date?
Yes.
And fondly?
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I'm struggling to get any information out of this fella here.
Yeah. It's sort of an awkward one because she was a married lady.
Oh, I see. That kind of
It made it difficult.
makes it difficult.
Yeah.
What about
So was Carol when I met her. She had separated from her husband, and her husband's friend had called me in to give him a bit of counselling, because I was still in the priesthood then, and so we went round and we sorted him out and wrote to his wife, and she came down, and a few days later things were in a bigger mess than
and the rest
could have been. The rest is history.
and the rest is history. Do you remember your first date with Carol?
Oh yes, I can remember.
Was it a good date? Was
Yeah,
it?
it was a lovely day.
Where'd you go?
We didn't go anywhere. We were at their house,
Right.
and we just had a very, very pleasant discussion about where we were at and what we were doing, and I'll never forget it.
It must have felt right.
Yeah, it was right.
Did you know then?
Yes, about 4 days after I met her.
Wow.
Yeah.
And here we are now. You're 80, and Carol still you visit her every day.
Yes.
She's in Plymouth Court, and you're it's absolutely clear to me that you're as close as ever.
Oh yeah. When God does something, He does it right.
Yes, he does.
He does.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
How would you describe Carol? What are her strengths?
Oh, she was all strength. She was the best all-rounder you could possibly get. She was a loving person. She was a wonderful mother. We had 35 foster children through the home, as well as her 2 children. And we adopted one of those foster children and kept on with a set of twins for, well, they still call me mum and dad, and one of them lives just down the road.
Wow.
She could bake and cook. She hired herself out as a landscape gardener.
Yeah.
She worked in garden shops. She worked in florist shops. She worked in and people that have helped us shift will know that she is a marvelous caterer for doing lunches and things. She was, I should say. She just worked in lunchbox places in Nelson and Hokitika and Gore, takeaways and stuff.
35 foster children.
Yeah, just mostly infants and mostly short term.
Of course.
Mm.
What was the drive? That was the, I guess, doing good, helping in time of need.
Well, it was definitely helping in time of need. The first wee fellow we had, Danny, he was his mum was in the hospital and he didn't know where to go. She was a solo mum, so we took him home and looked after him for 2 or 3 weeks, and then she got better and then went back again, and so we got to know Danny quite well. His favourite occupation was riding me as a motorbike and scraps in my ear with his foot because he's trying to start it.
do you still keep in touch with
No,
any
not with any of those. No,
they come and go in your life?
they came and went. We stopped having them when we was still in Christchurch at the time, and we heard the Tasha Lee, the daughter we adopted. She was 3 or 4 at the time, and the twins were a few years younger, a couple of years younger. But we heard them in the front yard, and they were discussing when it would be their time to leave.
Oh no.
So we thought, it's time for us to stop. So we stopped, but we have had 1 or 2 since then. We had one over here, one wee girl. She's grown into a marvellous young lady. Yeah.
Actually, you could imagine some little ones being really concerned about that, especially if they'd seen a lot come and go, and not really understanding.
It's a lot goes on in a child's mind that we just don't understand.
Yeah.
We found out in our older age, from the children, just what they thought of
At the
various
time.
things at the time. Yeah.
I'm going through a bit of that at the moment.
Yeah.
So how long have you and Carol been married? So it must be 30.
47 years now.
Also, 50 coming up?
Yeah, 3 years time.
Invite me. I'll be there.
You'll be there?
Oh, I'd love to.
Yeah.
50.
Great.
That's a good number of years.
You can make it. Yeah.
Yeah, well, we're all like that. So how many children did you have together? You had 3.
No, in actual fact, Carol had 2 when we got married,
Right.
and we took the other 3 on. I've never had any child.
Right. So, but
she-
5
I've made enough. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's a good number.
Yeah.
Your grandparents. Did you ever meet your grandparents?
My grandparents.
Yes.
I met my grandmother, but I have very little recollection of her. She was staying with an auntie of mine just round in River Street, round from home, and I just remember this old lady, this old Irish lady. But she died when I was quite young.
Yeah, that's quite a common. Theme. Not many around that age, when they're around 80, when you're around your age, not many people recall their grandparents.
No.
The odd one, but not very many. What do you consider the most important inventions that have occurred in your lifetime?
This video thing.
Yep,
That
thingamajig.
would have to be the most. Oh, it's cell phones and the development of all this electronic stuff. It's left me behind, but I think it's the most telling things that have happened in the last 50 years anyway.
Yeah. It's been so rapid.
It's
been so rapid.
I started off all right, but I couldn't keep up. When we first got a computer at Nanad's, I was the one in charge of it, but I lost it.
In your lifetime as a child, did you always have a fridge?
Always have
A refrigerator.
No.
So
No,
how did you
no.
manage without a refrigerator?
I had the old safe in the wall.
So was it just sort of on the outside of the house?
It was through the southwest facing wall in the kitchen,
Yeah.
and it was just a big box.
And so if there was meat, would there be meat hanging there?
Well, it was only a box, so it would be placed in there.
Oh, yeah, placed in it.
Yeah.
What
But
about
it was cooked
milk?
Fairly quickly. Milk the same. It used to come in billies in those days. You never had bottles or anything in those.
And how did the milk get delivered, or did you go and get
A
it?
horse and dray. My early memories of Bert Dickey and his horse and dray, and his dipper into the water, fill in our billy. And
Oh, and fill your belly and you take it
take it
inside?
yeah.
Gosh.
Used to hate it in the winter time because he'd feed his cows on Swede turnips.
Oh, and the milk
And that's
tastes.
tainted with milk. Awful.
What about TV? When did you first see TV?
I could tell you that because it was in a shop window in 1956 when the Melbourne Olympics were on.
And so you went down, that'd be in Gore?
No, it was in Oamaru. I was in school in Oamaru.
Okay, in Oamaru, downtown.
Yeah,
Gosh, that's a story that's familiar. We were the same in Westport,
yeah.
down to Greenwoods, and there was,
There's TVs in the window.
yeah. What about your first car?
Oh, my first car was a 1949 Ford Prefect. the bubbles type, the one that went up and down and
Yeah.
rolled so easily on the road.
That's it.
Yeah.
And we all blame the wind.
Yeah, we all learned the way.
And were you a car man?
No.
You just...
No. I never grew up with mechanical things. I'm ignorant of that sort of thing. I'm a bookworm.
Yeah. Yeah, no, understand. How's the world different today than it was when you were a child?
I bet you can. A lot of people have told you what a lot of the differences. Well, as I remember it as a child, I grew up in Gore. We heard very little of violence and murder or crime. We heard little of it. It may have been about, but it was not as prominent as it is today. Things were dealt with on a one-to-one basis in general sphere, a smack in the bum and do what you're told.
Yep.
And that was something that we learned. We learned to do what we were told. We weren't told. We were never told anybody what to do. I had 10 older brothers and sisters. They used to tell me what to do, and then I went into a monastery, and they used to tell me what to do.
Yeah.
So I sort of got used to it. But we had a great deal more actual freedom. We would wander around the town. We'd wander down to the river. We'd try and drown each other, actually. Trying to raft the river in flood with a raft that wasn't sewn together properly. And it all collapsed.
And so what's your perception of how kids your age back then are handling it today?
Well, I feel sorry for the kids today. I really feel as though they have a much harder road to hoe, because we were given direction and we were taught to take direction. And today they're more or less taught to question everything and make up their own decisions, which I'm totally in favour of. But there are so many pressures on them that the decisions they make are sometimes wrong.
Yeah, and I guess this type of media that we're involved in here, and how instant there's an earthquake in Japan, and 30 seconds later, you and I will be talking about it.
We know about it. That's right.
When it didn't happen when we were kids, did it?
No. The people that used to rush to newspaper offices during the war, to see the list of casualties and injured and dead, and they would be weeks later.
Yeah.
Even things like the Tangiwai disaster in '53, we didn't hear about that. We heard about it on the radio, but it didn't impact on you until you saw the newsreels on the movie, at the movies.
And the number of people who died in it is incredible.
48 or something.
During your life, has there been a person that's come along that you've clicked with and they've changed the way, like a mentor or someone who's you've really benefited off coming across in your life?
My wife.
Of course.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She had a hard road to hoe, because she picked me up. I mean, we clicked from the start, but then she had to train me, because I had no concept of living with a person or anything. I mean, I'd lived in a family, but I'd left that family when I was 16 and gone back to boarding school, then a boarding school in Australia, then into the monastery, and then just into the monasteries as they were in the various parts of the country. And you become a very selfish individual.
Having led a sheltered life.
A very sheltered life.
Yeah.
I mean, how more sheltered could it be?
Yeah.
And she's had to teach me so much, and she's done it so lovingly that I think I've accepted her teaching, and I'm not a bad sort of bloke after all.
You're very blessed. Now, Michael, how would you describe your sense of humour? To me, you've got a ready smile.
Yeah.
You've always been.
I like jokes. Laughter's the best medicine, I've always thought, and it tends to break tension and release people from fights and worries and things.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a family, brothers, all good jokers, and I've had people that I hardly knew. They must have thought I was I'll tell you a story. Back in 1988, we'd shifted house in Christchurch, and we had an open fire, and it was a big lounge, and it was as cold as, and you couldn't get any heat out of it. So we organised from Smith City to get a second-hand, we call those wood burners.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and the bloke put it in. I can't remember his name. He's a joker. Anyway, he put it in, and the day he finished putting it in and demonstrating it to us and everything, was the day of my daughter's engagement party. So that was all right. The day after that party, I got a ring from an old lady, and she was bitter and sour. She said, "You've put in a new fire and it smokes." And I said, "Well, I wasn't aware that it smoked, it's just gone in." And she said, "Well, it smokes." And what's more, she said, "You had a party last night, and the noise in the street was just terrible. It kept us awake all flimming night." And then something else happened, and I twigged. It was the fellow that had put in
I put the fireplace in.
the fireplace in.
Oh, I love it.
And I never got back at him.
Love it. What do you have hobbies? So obviously, one of your hobbies is reading.
Well, yes, scripture study is a hobby of mine.
Yes.
I live it and I enjoy it. It's something that I just learn of so much, and I say that would be my hobby at the moment. Just keeping the house and the garden and doing that, and going to the gym a couple of times a week.
I hear that my wife's one of your gym buddies.
Yes, yeah.
And now, Michael, have you ever met any famous people? I mean, I don't know have you met the Pope?
Yes,
have you met the Pope? Have you met?
No, I'll tell you what I have done. 1976, we went to Christchurch from Nelson and bought a little house, and it needed painting, and my wages wouldn't cope with all the expenses of running the house and painting it.
Yeah.
So I got myself a job from an Irishman named Tim Fahey, wearing a white coat at Addington Raceway. And the first job, it was in 1978, after we'd been there for a while. I think it was 77 or 78, I can't remember for sure. But anyway, the first job, he never interviewed me. He had my phone number and he rang me and he said, you want a job? And I said, "Yes, I do." And he said, "Be at Addington at 4:30 on Tuesday," which is an odd day to have races. So I went to Addington, I raced and lined up with the other fellows, and he looked at me and he says, "Oh, you'll do." He said, "Stand over there." And 3 other fellows stood over there with us, and then a senior man came along and led us out, and we went into the public stand, and we stood in a corner there, and a corner there, and a corner there, and a corner there, and Her Majesty the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh.
No.
We were the bodyguard for the Duke of Edinburgh. In the time when the Irish troubles were on, with a name like Ted Fahey and Michael O'Brien.
You'd have to wonder.
You begin to wonder. You wonder about security in those days.
Well,
That's one of the biggest changes. When you mention changes, that's what I meant to mention. That's the biggest change that's happened. Security.
Security everywhere.
Everywhere. Police reports. You can't get a job without a police report.
Yep.
Having a CV and proving your existence. We never had to do that. And when I first got a job, you walked along and somebody advertised for a job, and he says, "Well, you take me on?" I say, "Yes."
We were all the same.
Yeah.
I think I recall walking along the main street in Palmerston Street looking for a job, and every window had a sign that said, electrician wanted, apprentice offer wanted, and you walked in, and generally you walked out, and the job was yours.
Yeah.
And it was pretty amazing. In your any special awards, anything like that you ever got into? Can you describe a time in your life of peace, one where I have a couple actually, but can you describe a place where you were that you felt was just so peaceful, and perhaps you could say close to God, you know?
White baiting on the Hokitika Mountain. And I used to look across to the mountains, the snow caps, and I would just relax. It was such a wonderful occupation. I just sad that my back gave out on me.
And I guess Jeff Day was too along from you.
Oh, he was there. Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
It is down at Sunset Point. It's very peaceful, isn't it?
It is. It's a marvellous place, but that would be one of the places. Yeah.
And Michael, have you travelled a lot in your life?
Not really. No.
You've done obviously Australia and a bit of New Zealand, or a lot of New Zealand.
A couple of times back to Australia.
Any particular place that you can recall going to where you think, gee, that was beautiful?
Yeah. Well, the one that we went to, where we finished off our secondary education before going on to the seminary, Gaylong, the little village, sort of in the Riverina area of New South Wales.
Right.
And I've been back a couple of times, and it's just a place. Every time I feel right at home. It's where I learned about snakes and wood and all sorts of things. But it was my introduction to Australia, and it's always been a sort of a place, like the program says, a place to call home. Yeah.
That's a good program, isn't it?
I don't know. I never watched it.
Oh, I do. I think it's awesome. Yeah. And clearly, I can tell just by talking to you that you know exactly what I'm talking about when I ask that question. There are places, aren't there?
Yeah.
And if you're lucky enough in your life to have come across one, it's pretty good. Now, tell me, is there anything that you've always wanted to do and that you haven't done? Still got plenty of time.
Yeah, still got time.
You don't want to climb Mount Cook, or?
No. I was a front row forward, and front row forwards don't climb mountains.
Right.
They work in quick bursts of energy, and then they sit back and recoup their energy, and then go again.
And were all the O'Brien boys like that? They were all front rowers?
No.
You had a couple of skinny ones?
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 of them. We all look alike, but all the builds seem to be different.
Okay.
I don't know whether it was the time of the year or the food we ate or what, but no, Charlie and Bill. Charlie was a lock forward, but he used to sprint, a professional sprinter back in the 50s and 60s down the south, and when they had those sports meetings.
Wow.
Tuatapri and Otata and Riverton and Browns and all that. Bill was the same, he used to sprint. Lewis was a tall, skinny bloke. He used to say, boast to me that you couldn't fatten thoroughbreds.
Yeah.
I said, you can't fatten weeds either.
No, all strays.
Yeah.
So there'll be a number of young people that will, over the years, will view this video. And is there a lesson that you've learned in your life that you would be prepared to share with them? A lesson of do this or don't do this?
Well, one lesson is not to make eternal decisions as a youngster, not to decide to do something and feel you have to stick at it all your life, because life and circumstances, you grow older, you mature in a different way, and you're going to make other choices later on, and you're going to feel guilty if you've committed yourself to something that you don't feel right in it later on. I don't know how to say it.
Well, no, you've said it very well. It's very insightful. You know, I mean, what you're saying is, don't lock yourself in when you're young, because life changes.
Yeah.
It throws curveballs, it throws opportunities, it throws, all sorts of things.
It does. And I just think of some of these young people that are taking drugs now, make a decision to take the drugs, and then they've got to somehow get off it when they mature a bit. And I feel very sorry for them that they've been put in a position of making that decision in the first place.
Yeah.
Because I don't think they want to. Well, no, I rephrase that. At that time they want to, but they don't realise where it's leading. and the problems it's going to cause.
There's no reverse, is there?
Well, there is, but you've got to suffer for it.
Mm. So, Michael, in your life, you've been a great contributor to the Hokitika community on a consistent basis.
Not really.
Well, I've seen you at many sports events.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen you. You're always out there, and here you are now. You're a daily visitor to Plymouth Court. You look after Carol. I see that you chat with virtually everybody in there, and that must be a real comfort to them as well.
Well, it's good fun.
Yes.
It's good to. I like to. Bruce, I've always had a trouble remembering people's names. Right through my life, I could not remember people's names, and I've made an effort down there because so many of the little girls are from Asia and other parts of the world, and they have names that are a wee bit difficult sometimes, and I like to surprise them by remembering who they are, and they appreciate it.
There's some lovely staff down there, isn't there?
Great.
Yeah,
they really are great.
Yeah,
and to hear them having each other on a bit, it's really. Does everybody good. The residents there, they enjoy it, and I certainly enjoy it. And
I had yesterday about 11:45, the phone rang, and it was one of the staff down there, and they said, "Bruce, we've got turkey on for lunch,
yes.
and you're invited. We've put a seat aside for you." And I said, "I can't. I've got something." "Oh no!" I said, "You can't ring me at 11:45." And
Yes.
but I said, "I'm so disappointed." But did it go well?
Yeah, it was marvellous. It was just a good fun time.
Yeah.
And they do have fun. They all dressed up, and like for Queen's birthday weekend, they all dressed up. We had Patsy Bell come as the Queen, and
Right.
she does a good job. So I knew it was coming, so I got dressed up too, and I had my photo taken with the Queen.
Oh, that was lovely.
It was very lovely, but I've never seen the photo.
and I think the last time I went, Al Hunter was there singing.
Yeah, he goes and sings with his son.
Yeah, he's got a great voice, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's marvellous.
Yeah,
He was there yesterday.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And now tell me, we're kind of getting to the end of our wee chat, and is there something that you knew at 20 about living a peaceful, successful life, or something that you didn't know at 20 that you know now? Everyone's looking, the world is looking for something. The world is looking for climate change. It's looking for climate emergencies. It's looking for the drug problem to be sorted. It's looking for, it's looking for all sorts of things, but really they're looking for peace in themselves,
Yeah, nah.
in the heart,
No.
because without that,
Yeah.
you've got nothing. And what's your experience, say?
Well, mine is basically a religious experience. I left the priesthood and I left the Catholic Church, but God never left me, and I have found peace with Him because I feel as though I'm a complete person when I'm in contact with Him, and nothing seems to bother me. And it's just what happens now. I don't get upset about things in the world anymore. I have a
Peaceful
future
life.
life, and I'm looking forward to that. I have no hesitation in admitting it, and I tell them down there, it's like poor Dennis Fellett, he's saying he missed me up this time again. He says, it must be my time soon, and I'm thinking the same thing. I think, I'm 80. I never meant to be 80. I was supposed to die. Well, my fellow used to tell me I'd die of fat around the heart when I was 30. Before I was 30.
I've got to say that, look, your colour's good. You're active. You're not going anywhere.
Well, I am.
Oh, well, one day you will.
I am terminal.
Yes, of course, of
We're all
course.
terminal.
Now, one of my little pet things is, how are we going to get the church rebuilt?
The one in here.
Yeah, it's a place that belongs. It's not just to Catholics. It belongs to the people of Westland, and in particular the people of Hokitika. It's photographed worldwide.
Yes.
It's clearly got a few problems.
It has. It's been abandoned for so long.
Yes, it has, and I just don't know the answer. Does anyone know the answer?
No, I don't. I certainly
No.
don't. No, I used to walk past it every morning going to work, and I admired it. I've been there a few times when the service was there.
Yeah.
I didn't realise it was going to fall down on me, or it could fall down on me. I still don't think it is.
No.
Probably be still there when the rest of the town's gone. But,
Yeah. And you know, there are and I think you're probably right. Look, it'll need a miracle to find the 5 million to fix it.
That much, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's that debate about whether it should be pulled down or whether a new one should be built. And I don't know the answer to that either.
No, I don't know. It's the same with the cathedral in Christchurch. I mean, I know they're going to rebuild it, are they?
Yes,
they're
yes.
going to restore it.
Yes, they are.
But it's going to be an old building that was fallen down and been restored. It's not ever going to be the old cathedral again.
No,
it's
and
never going to have that.
And it's going to cost 150 odd million, I believe, the last figure I saw.
Same as that one in Paris, whatever.
Yeah, Notre
You
Dame.
can't bring back what was past. That's one of the things I'm learning in life. You can't live in the past, and you can't bring back the past. I'm not as fit as I used to be. I can't do the things I used to do, and I can't bring them back. No matter how much I go down to the gym, I'm always going to be an old bugger trying.
Well, you seem to be doing pretty well from my spies tell me down there,
Yeah.
and that's great. Well, look, coasters, I hope you've enjoyed this series. There are 7 interviews in the series, and it's Michael O'Brien. He's a coaster. He's a big part of our community in Hokitika, has been for many years. He's 80 years old at the present time, and I'm going to diary him in that if I'm around in 10 years, I'd like to interview him when he's 90, because I actually think he'll do it no trouble. Michael, thank you so much for your time.
You, Bruce.
I really appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. I've never done this before, so yeah, you've learned a lot about me.
Thank you.